Yep.
Wonderful. Thank you. So welcome to the Neuro-affirmative environment training today. I'm going to be leading this training. My name's Emma Camborne, alongside Alex Kello, my colleague, and we're both specialist advisory teachers for the Access to Inclusion team. So the aims of today's session is to have a shared understanding of the meaning of neurodiversity and also the meaning of the term neuro-affirmative. We're going to be exploring the double empathy problem today and consider how a neuro-affirmative approach and ethos can support all children and young people in your setting. There are additional slides which we won't be sharing with you today in the training, but that you can share when you're back in your setting. These will help you to consider ways in which you can develop a neuro-affirmative environment. So we'll begin by considering, what does neurodiversity mean? So looking at the screen here and the images, there are many types of flowers: roses, daisies, and tulips. All are different and all are beautiful. We don't consider any one type of flower superior to another. We don't try to make the rose more like the daisy, because we consider daisies the best sort of flower. And in nature, there are different types of everything. We've got different types of flowers, trees, birds, rocks, and of course, people. One specific aspect of human diversity is neurodiversity, or the diverse ways in which humans think, learn, and relate to others. So what does neurodiversity mean? Neurodiversity is a basic scientific truth. People vary in the way that their brains take in, process, and respond to information. This diversity of information processing gives rise to a diversity of experiences in the world. And the presence of neurodiversity in the human race explains why it is that we are not all the same, and give rise to the types of variation that are often labelled with a diagnosis such as autism, ADHD, developmental language disorder, to name but a few. This is one of the first films we're going to show to you. It's a really super film clip with a simple way of explaining diversity, and that might be helpful for you to share with pupils in your setting and also staff members. Okay, so some really key messages shared in that video. If there's any difficulty watching it, then Faye will put it into the chat box for you. So moving on to thinking about our key messages today, which are around neurodivergent people and the education system. Unfortunately, this natural diversity of cognitive functioning is not yet recognised by our education and other systems. Some ways of being, such as those labelled with dyslexia, ADHD, or autism, are currently considered inferior. They are not yet seen as a natural aspect of human variation to be accepted and expected. And despite huge advances in our understanding of autism and other neurodivergent conditions, it is still the medical model of disability which can dominate in schools. We diagnose, giving pupils labels of disorders and deficits, implying that they are in some way inferior to their peers. We recognise that different flowers need different environments to thrive. Some need sun, some need shade. Some flourish in sandy soil and others in chalky ground. Yet we assume all young people will benefit from the same environment and the same input. So using the terminology of neurodiversity, we can describe the biggest group of people as neurotypical. They tend to flourish fairly easily in our education system and beyond, because they are in the majority. These systems are often built by people like them, for people like them. Neurodivergent people, also referred to as neuroatypical or neurominorities, can struggle in these systems because of the mismatch between the way their brains process information and the way the system implicitly expects them to operate. Therefore, it's crucial to look at our environments through a neurodivergent lens to ensure that it allows all children and young people to flourish.
Now we're going to consider the theory of double empathy, and this is built on the work of Dr. Damien Milton, and he proposes that one group will always find it difficult to put itself in the position of the other group's experiences because of that their difference in their experiences, and therefore there is an empathy gap. Just show you the clip. Thank you. So in terms of the double empathy problem there, we can see that actually there is that empathy gap, but the group of people having to show the most empathy and do the most work, in fact, are the neurodiverse group, because obviously the neuro majority, the neurotypical young people, the world is better suited for them. So something to consider in your setting is around are any of your pupils masking? And I know that there's a wonderful recorded training from Charlotte Owens on the Senko discussion page on the website that you might like to have a look at. And it's really important that we're looking and always thinking, are we just expecting all the acceptance to be going one way, and that it needs to be closing the gap is the responsibility of all of us. So moving on to, what does being neuro-affirmative mean? So one of the best ways to support, celebrate, show understanding towards neurodivergent people is to be neuro-affirming. And that allows all of the students in your classes and in your schools to be achieving the best that they can. And in the image there, we can see the difference between equality, where everybody gets the same, and equity, where everybody gets the same opportunity for success. We don't all need the same, but we should all have the same opportunity for success. So a neuro-affirming mindset means that we're accepting that diversity and that we make sure that the offer reflects that. And it's perfectly okay, and it's not something that needs to be corrected. So why does it matter? Well, it matters because the Zen Code of Practice sets down that all of us are responsible and accountable for the progress and development of pupils in the classes, and that approximately 20% of the population could be neurodivergent in one way or another. Some neurodivergent conditions are much more visible than others. Both Emma and I have a long history of being involved with speech, language and communication needs, which is often considered to be one of the least visible of all. And it's important that affirming environments are for everyone. High quality teaching is really important. If your universal offer isn't good, it doesn't matter that you have additional interventions and things along that, because if they're not built on a really good universal offer, then that's not going to be successful for the children. And it is everyone's responsibility to meet the needs of the children in the classroom by removing those barriers to success. So this is something that we'll often hear. Do I need to do something different for each child? And there's a quote there, you know, I've got one with ADHD, one with autism, one with dyslexia, one with dyspraxia. How am I meant to teach all of them with 30 others to consider? We're not suggesting that you're going to do something different for every child. That just wouldn't be possible. So what we're suggesting is a much more flexible way, so that your neuro-affirming environment means that everyone can achieve the best that they can. They won't all want the same, and their success won't all look the same. And it's really important. Staff can often feel overwhelmed, and I know Emma and I in our work going out into schools see lots of that. People feeling really overwhelmed. Teaching is a very challenging job, but you don't need to be planning something separate for everybody. It's about having that flexible range of teaching and learning, and it then allows everyone to achieve the best that they can. So, question, do you have a neuro-affirmative ethos? So if you do, your pupils would all feel these three things. They'll feel acceptance, accepted as their true self, not needing to mask, not needing to pretend, not needing to be somebody other than they are, but their own true self. They're all going to feel belonging, feeling they belong in the classroom. And that's the good thing about a neuro-affirmative environment. It belongs to everybody, and everybody is equal in it, and have a connection, having that meaningful relationship. And it doesn't matter who that relationship is with, but it's a meaningful relationship. So how do you create that neuro-affirmative ethos? And it's important for all young people to hear appropriate language. Language really matters. If you're always described as having a disorder or a condition, those things undermine how you feel about yourself. We would say, rather than challenging behaviours, and we acknowledge that it is a challenge, often that behaviour is challenging to us as the adults are trying to support, but actually the behaviour itself is distressed. It's a child showing distress. Reframing your language in that positive way. So you've told me that your preferred communication style is to look away when you're talking to me, as that helps you to concentrate. Lots of our young people need to do that. Lots of our young people need to move, fidget, wriggle, to be able to listen really effectively. If you are flexible in your approach, if you're thinking, actually, my bigger picture is I want you to be listening and taking in what I'm teaching. Actually, the objective isn't I want you to sit still. The objective is I want you to listen. And if moving helps somebody listen, then that's your objective achieved. And this one here, I think you prefer to be on your own at playtimes. Is that right? If you would like a friend, come and tell me or show me. Acknowledging and accepting that everybody's going to be different and their presentations are going to be different. Some people are very happy in a huge crowd, other people much, much happier to be on their own. And both of those are perfectly okay. And acceptance both ways. This came up on social media in April. April is Autism Acceptance Month, and Autism Acceptance Month is a lot around autism being accepted by other people. Actually, acceptance is both ways, and this made me smile, so I popped it in the slide there. Autism Acceptance Month is about to start. Anyone not accepted by an autistic person before the 30th of April will be yeeted into the sun. Acceptance is both ways.
Thank you, Alex. So now, considering why is being neuro-affirming so important, we're going to begin by thinking about improved mental health and well-being. So data from a survey shows that up to 46% of autistic children and young people between the ages of 3 and 16 years have at least one mental health condition. The pressure on neurodiverse people to mask, make eye contact, or adjust their self-regulating behaviours in neurotypical situations can lead to really poor mental health, anxiety, stress, and low self-esteem. And it's really important to know, as I'm sure you do, that boys mask too. And it takes really good cognition and memory to establish a persona and maintain that all day. It's extremely tiring. So it's more frequently seen in cognitively able children and young people. Low self-esteem tends to escalate in autistic people when stigma surrounding their differences is viewed negatively. This can often lead to bullying and exclusion, which exacerbates the cycle of stress and anxiety that comes from masking and other modifications to fit in. One thing that I quite often hear, as I'm sure my colleagues do, is the pupil won't accept the equipment, or the pupil won't accept the adaptations because they feel differently to the other pupils within their setting. So we will talk about that, and that's part of the additional slides at the end of this presentation. So what can you do to make a difference? It's about you and your approach. So with a neuro-affirming approach, it allows everyone to be themselves, regardless of their neurotype. Your mindset focuses more on the child and young person's strengths and their skills, which will help to create a result of an improvement in self-esteem and mental health, rather than focusing on the things that they find more difficult. I'm going to hand over to Alex for this bit.
Okay. So what you can do is the little bit around it comes from the work of Dr. Hannah Bolcher. Her book, Taking Off the Mask, is a really valuable book, particularly if your school is for secondary age children. But she talks a great deal about connecting with what makes you happy, and that the really importance of everyone having that opportunity for activities that are enjoyable, because that helps with self-regulation. So that might be private places to stim, it might be access to sensory, sensory enjoyable things. And she talks about glimmers, and we hear a lot about triggers, the things that make life harder for us, the things that we find annoying. And obviously one person's stim may well be somebody else's trigger, but she talks about glimmers, and those are the things that make you happy. And for her, and her book and her work is based on her experience as an autistic woman, and also with her group of autistic research colleagues. And they talk about that practicing that positive mindset, looking for the glimmers, looking for the good things about your day, and ensuring that your day has glimmers in it, because that will really help that balance. We put the scales there because we have to think about that balance that we're all seeking, balancing off the triggers in life with the glimmers in life.
And Hannah Belcher talks about practicing mindfulness, which is really important. Mindfulness means awareness. It allows us to focus on the present and helps regulate emotions. Mindfulness, we use the breath as an anchor. So strategies and techniques related to mindfulness could be so helpful to our children and young people. Okay. Another aspect of why being neuroaffirming is so important, it's to help us to understand the impact of pain on our neurodiverse pupils. So approximately 80% of autistic young adults have something called Ehlers-Danlos syndromes, EDS, okay, or hypermobility. That often co-occurs with chronic fatigue or some degree of autistic burnout. What's interesting and important for us to understand is autistic pain and fatigue are often not felt as pain, instead as anxiety or dysregulation. So the new thinking is that pain is more common in autistic people and needs to be given more routine consideration and accommodation. Interestingly, pain will often make a young person gravitate towards sensory comfort and avoid scenarios where pain is exasperated. So what strategies can you adopt to help children and young people with this? It may help to talk openly about pain. It will depend on the child or young person you're working with as to what resources you use. It might be objects of reference, symbols, photographs, and so on. It might be a comic strip conversation. So where possible, do that and encourage your young person to keep a pain diary. You might want to use supportive seating or need to experiment with the child, young person to try and establish what's most comfortable for them. It may help to strengthen their core strength using yoga sessions and Pilates and things like that. And all of those things are aimed to kind of mitigate that joint and posture problem. Okay. Also, being neuroaffirming is important because it helps to develop those really important connections and relationships. When an individual is neuroaffirming, it can lead to much more positive relationships. So the simple act of valuing how a neurodivergent person communicates and embrace their differences really breaks down barriers and allows the neurodivergent person to be themselves. They're no longer masking. They can take off their mask, at least to some degree. In Hannah Belcher's book, where there's an image of it below, taking off the mask, she says, there is no greater feeling than feeling you belong where you are with those around you as your full, true self. So that comes back to those points that Alex made earlier when we're considering acceptance. Does the child feel accepted in your setting? Belonging, do they feel that they belong? And connection, have they got a connection to someone in your setting? It doesn't matter who it is, but are they connected to someone? Okay, in addition to that, what can you do? It's about actively making adjustments that enable the neurodivergent person to embrace their individuality. And we often talk about getting that young person's voice in whichever way is the most appropriate for that young person to gain their voice. It might be and hopefully is collaborating with parents and carers to establish which adjustments will be most helpful for them. And it may be a trial and error process to get things right. As we talked about earlier, avoiding negative language when referring to differences, showing support, care, and acceptance. And then creating an environment that fosters positive relationships and connections. We'll later go on to talk about the checklist for a neuro-affirmative environment. And part of that is looking at your expressive language towards the child and developing that positivity and those relationships. Okay, the importance of, oh, I think that we might have skipped one there, Alex, sorry. The importance of being neuroaffirmative in relationship to academic improvement. When, as an educator, you adopt a neuroaffirming approach, accommodations are made to ensure the neurodivergent student is supported to reach their full potential. What can you do to achieve that? You may want to make changes to the physical environment to enable a neurodivergent student to, for example, move around. We know lots of our students find it really difficult to sit and listen. They are often quite capable of doing something else while they're listening, and that helps them to focus. Sometimes they need to pace at the back of the classroom, for example, and that's without any judgment. And similarly, to be able to stim without any judgment. We don't discourage those behaviours, we all stim to a certain extent. And we encourage that sensory support, those sensory support aids, for example, headphones. They work for some pupils, they don't work for others. You may want to experiment with lots of different types of headphones. Some may be more suitable for some children than others. Some are less obvious, which perhaps might be helpful for some pupils, particularly as they get older. Really important that you recognise that neurodivergent students are not being uncooperative when they perform self-regulating behaviours. We've just touched on pain and how common that is with our neurodivergent population. And also that demand avoidant behaviour is anxiety driven. So when you're thinking about that behaviour, think about their anxiety and what things you could put in play to try and reduce that anxiety. Have a can't, not won't approach. Which barriers can we remove to help that child engage? And also, it's so key to educate other pupils in your setting to understand that diverse thinking and behaviours are positive, interesting and valuable. And that's why that first video that we showed using the Lego people might be really helpful to share in your settings to encourage that discussion around neurodivergence. So how then can you create a neuro-affirmative approach in your classroom? Alex talked about that universal level of provision as a beginning point, as the foundation. So many difficulties we know arise from unmet need. But if we can get that provision correct and really embedded at the universal level, there is less unmet need. So having an environment that is set up to be neuroaffirmative means that all children, whether they are neurotypical or neurodiverse, can access any resources. They don't need to be an additional extra. And that's really important. Pupils then won't need to stand out as different in order to learn and thrive in the way that best suits them. So the key message really here is that neuroaffirmative environments benefit everybody.
Coming on then to the CERTS model, obviously CERTS is something that Somerset has been benefiting from the training from Emily Rubin now for about 18 months or so, and the framework really builds in that transactional support. That's where the neuro-affirming environment really comes into its own. The partners, that's those of us, the adults working in the classrooms, taking that responsibility for their side in the interaction and using interpersonal supports and learning supports to ensure that success and to support growth. It's really important, the CERT's emotional regulation, that energy meter, matching my energy where I am, matching it to the energy that I need for the activity. Similarly, this was picked up in the demand avoidant training that that is also on the website as a recorded offer, where you're matching the demand of the activity with the anxiety that the child is experiencing. When you get a good match, you get good learning. The other part of the slide there, and these are all in the CERTS resources around the different sensory areas and those things that are alerting and those things that are calming. And it's important that we are modeling that so that young people understand that adults are not just always nice and calm, that they have that understanding of the work that we're all going through to keep that regulation, keep that homeostasis, and that these are tools that everyone can use. And in a neuro-affirming environment, they would be available for everyone.
Okay, as an Access to Inclusion team, we created a checklist for a neuro-affirmative classroom, and you should have been sent that prior to the training session today. If not, Faye has put it in the chat box. So this checklist we hope will be really useful to you in your settings. It's got 6 main categories. Firstly, the environment, then sensory support, supporting receptive language, supporting expressive language, social communication and learning. So for each of those categories, there's descriptions within them. There's an opportunity for staff to say whether they've observed that in the setting, not observed it, and any further comments. The aim of the checklist is that you may wish to take one category rather than all 6. There's a lot of information. Focus on one. We would hope it would be a really supportive process in your setting. And you may want to encourage staff to use the checklist to find good examples of neuro-affirmative practice that are already taking place, which I'm sure there are. And we're going to return to how you can use it further in your setting towards the end of the training. And really importantly, how can we measure the impact of a neuro-affirmative environment? We need the big start data and the end data so that we can really see if any differences have occurred. So it may be really helpful for some to have different checklists completed. So staff, parents and children, the young person can work together to complete the environmental audit to identify key aspects of your environment that may be having an impact on the pupil. That's available on the Autism Education Trust website. And the following checklist is also available there, which is a sensory preferences and differences checklist. What's really, really key is you complete those checklists and then you identify which changes are going to be made. Reasonable adjustments can be made. Staff can then observe and record how those adjustments have impacted the pupil. Obviously, listen to the pupil's voice as well. If they've tried things and they don't like them, that's fine. We wouldn't ask you to continue using them. Really important to listen to what they're saying about them as well. We've also put a link at the bottom here to the Somerset Sensory Processing Handbook. It's a really, really valuable resource. So you can kind of look at the behaviours that are being exhibited and look at some strategies that can support with those behaviours. Within that handbook, there's also a really good recording sheet. So you can list what you've tried and then you can identify if it's alerting for the pupil or calming. And considering then, do you need the pupil to be in a more alert state to take on the next task or a calmer state to take on the next task? So their sensory diet can be adjusted based on that evidence.
Then going on to neurodiversity amongst staff. We know that neurodiverse children grow up to be neurodiverse adults, and lots of members of staff in schools are neurodiverse themselves. They have lots of skills around how they manage their day, how they manage their regulation, and often that relationship with neurodivergent young people and children in your setting is really important. It's important that that neurodiversity is valued and respected within your school team. Those strengths and needs are recognised, reasonable adjustments are made, that there are opportunities for staff to be able to regulate themselves, and that that is something that is modelled because it is good, healthy behaviour for people to manage their own sensory and emotional regulation. And children learn by example, and if they see us doing this, then it's good for them to be able to learn that. Also, there's a point there about staff regularly updated on neurodiversity within the school community. So is there staff training? Is there time given to read pupil passports? People spend lots and lots of time making beautiful pupil passports, but if they're never read, they really have much less value. There's lots of really good autism and neurodiversity training, both available from our services within the county and from other charities and organisations. Within your staff room there, it would be helpful to display information about the local offer, and there's a link there around resources to help you adapt the environment. Information around the Senko discussion group. Please share what you learn in these groups. I think that's where the recorded training is so valuable because you can share that. Sharing the quick checkers from the Somerset Graduated Response Tool. Often these are displayed within staff rooms, and also sometimes the image there of the test of abstract language comprehension, the TALC, can be displayed in staff room so that where there is a child who is perhaps on a lower than would be expected blank level, and so they've achieved level 2, which means that actually they can't do level 3, which is the one where you're asked to recount something. If everyone knows that, then it's less likely that members of staff will ask them to explain what happened, because actually if you can't recount something, that's going to be very, very hard for you. So thinking about possible next steps, there's the checklist for the neuro-affirmative classroom. Potentially, you might share that checklist with your staff in preparation for setting up their classrooms in September. We wouldn't be expecting anyone to be making any changes in the summer term. There's so much going on, but it's worth considering and using that as an audit, so that when you're setting up new things for coming in, you can be aware and making your classroom more neuro-affirmative. You might want to plan a learning walk using the checklist and focusing potentially on one area, making sure that it's something positive, that where we saw good practice, we're praising that good practice. And if we share the praise and share the quality practice that's in our schools, those things are really, really valuable. It's so much easier to learn something if you can see somebody whose professional opinion you value is already using it and you can see it in practice. It makes it more real. You might be considering having a staff audit, an audit of staff skills, so that they can be shared, and also potentially an audit of your school library. Have you got non-fiction and fiction books that reflect neurodiversity? If you can't see it, you can't be it. And we know that where children can read books that reflect their experience of life, it is really valuable. So what I'd like you to do now is I'd like you to just pop in the chat some of the things that you might be going to try in your school. Just one thing each. We'll give you a couple of minutes to do that.
Thinking if you're not in a school, if you're not a Senko in a school, perhaps as an advisory teacher or an EP, things that you may be recommended to schools in the future. Okay, I think we might come back to that a little bit later, shall we, Alex?
Yeah,
Is that
fine.
okay?
Oops, skip one. So there's a list on this page of various training that you can access. There's CERTS training. We know that the next round of CERTS training will be coming up in the autumn term. Please have a look there on the CERTS training website, and the link there is live. There's wonderful training on the National Autistic Society, and some of that is free. The free mental health training, the teens training is very, very good, but there's others that is, yes, you have to pay, but it's extremely reasonable. We're sort of talking £20 a module. There's the AET. Somerset is no longer a licence holder for AET, but that doesn't mean that Somerset schools can't access the training. You just do it directly through the charity there. And there's the EP training about ADHD. I know that you've got the questionnaire to say whether you still want that. There's information there on the local offer. There's also the recorded free training there about the ICSTC, Universal Level Training for School Staff. Emma has done that for us, and she's recorded her training, and it's free and it's available with a free pack of symbols. So if that's something that you want to be skilling up your staff on, that is something that you can access for free. Now, we've mentioned several times about the additional slides. When Emma and I wrote this training, we got into it quite a lot, and in fact wrote far more slides than could possibly be delivered in an hour. So what we've done is that the slides are available at the end of this PowerPoint. The slides are all going to be uploaded along with the recording of this training and also the checklist. So you have the whole pack to go away and use. And these are suggestions of strategies. They're strategies, adaptations, resources specifically linked to that environmental checklist. So it goes through in the same order that the checklist goes through. So if you do the checklist and you pick up something that is an issue, then you can go straight to the section of the slides that will relate to that. And obviously there's the recorded version of this training that you can share with your staff as you wish. So we'd like to stop the recording now so that